The twin suns of Reldros hovered low in the hazy green sky, their dying light casting long shadows through the dense forest. Here, the air was heavy, clinging to the skin with a dampness that carried the scent of decay and blooming life in equal measure. The forest hummed with the discordant melodies of alien insects, their bioluminescent bodies flickering faintly in the twilight, like will-o'-the-wisps mocking the weary traveler. Serena stumbled over a gnarled root that jutted from the damp soil, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She clutched her side, where a deep gash bled sluggishly, dark blue against her emerald skin. Her breaths were shallow, each one punctuated by a sharp, involuntary hiss. The wound was not fresh. It had been days since the beast's claws had found her flesh, but the infection had taken hold, and she could feel its heat coursing through her veins like a slow poison. She glanced back over her shoulder, her keen senses straining for any sign of pursuit. The forest behind her was still, its shadows deepening as the sun sank further. But stillness here was deceptive. Serena knew the predators of this land too well. They thrived in silence, their eyes glinting in the gloom like hungry stars. She could not keep running. Collapsing to her knees by a narrow stream, its water glowing faintly with an eerie light, she dipped her trembling hands into the current. The liquid was cool, soothing against her fevered skin, but she dared not drink it. Not here. Not with what she had seen. The waters of Reldros held secrets far deadlier than the beasts stalking its forests. Her vision blurred, and she blinked hard to steady herself. She pressed her palm against the ritual marks carved into her arm, a reminder of the life she had left behind, or the life that had left her. Exile. The word burned in her mind as sharply as the day she had been cast out. The weight of her people's judgment hung heavy on her shoulders, even now, in the depths of the wilderness, where no voice but her own could reach her. She should have died by now. The wilderness was not meant to be survived, yet here she was, clinging to life with a ferocity she did not fully understand. The sharp snap of a branch broke the silence, and Serena froze. Her hand instinctively went to her side, where the hilt of her ceremonial blade rested. Its once pristine surface was tarnished and cracked, a reflection of its bearer's disgrace. She drew it slowly, the faint hum of its edge slicing the air. Her ears, attuned to the faintest sound, picked up the rustling of foliage nearby. Not the sound of an animal. No, this was heavier, deliberate. Serena rose unsteadily to her feet, her blade at the ready. Her heart thundered in her chest, though her expression remained stone-cold, unyielding. She had faced death too many times to cower before it now. "Come out!" she called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. The alien tongue she spoke carried an authoritative weight, though it wavered at the edges, a faint crack of desperation slipping through. The underbrush parted, and what stepped through was unexpected. A human. He emerged slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace, though his movements were measured and tense. He was taller than she had expected, his frame lean but strong, wrapped in dust-covered gear that bore the marks of long travel. His face was obscured by a helmet, the visor reflecting the faint glow of the stream. When he spoke, his voice was low, cautious, and unfamiliar in its cadence. "I'm not here to hurt you." Serena did not lower her blade. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him for any sign of deception. A human here, in the depths of Reldros? It made no sense. The humans had long since abandoned any attempts to tame this world, deeming it too hostile, too wild. Those who ventured here did not return, yet this one stood before her, alive and unharmed. "Who are you?" she demanded, her grip tightening on the hilt of her blade. The man hesitated, his visor tilting slightly, as if he were studying her. Slowly, he removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with weariness and framed by short dark hair, his eyes sharp and gray like storm clouds locked onto hers. "My name is Elias," he said simply. His tone was calm, almost disarmingly so, but Serena was not one to be easily disarmed. "Why are you here?" He shrugged, a faint, humorless smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Same reason you are, I suppose. Trying to stay alive. Her jaw tightened. This was no ordinary traveler. No human stumbled upon Reldros by accident. There was always a reason, a purpose, and she intended to find out his. The silence between them stretched thin, taut as a bowstring. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the hum of insects dimming to a faint whisper. "You're injured," Elias said finally, his gaze dropping to the dark stain on her side. "Let me help." Serena took a step back, her blade held defensively. "I don't need your help." "Could have fooled me," he replied dryly, but there was no malice in his tone. Only a quiet insistence, a patience that unsettled her. Before she could respond, the forest came alive with the sound of distant howls, low, guttural, and growing closer. Both of them turned toward the noise, their postures instinctively shifting. Elias reached for something at his side, a weapon, she guessed, and Serena felt a flicker of curiosity beneath her mounting dread. Whatever hunted her was still out there, and now it hunted them both. She glanced at Elias, his stance steady, his eyes scanning the forest with practiced precision. Perhaps, for now, she could afford to let him help. The howl shattered the tenuous silence of the forest, a reverberating cry that seemed to twist the very air. It was a sound that Serena knew too well, low, guttural, and chilling in its unmistakable purpose. The prowlers were hunting. Elias turned toward her, his expression grim but steady. "We need to move." Serena hesitated, the blade in her hand trembling slightly as the weight of her predicament settled over her. She had been running for days, her strength waning with every step, and now, with the prowlers closing in and this enigmatic human offering his assistance, the choices before her felt impossibly narrow. But necessity was a cruel master. "Fine," she said, her voice tight with distrust, "but don't slow me down." Elias nodded and slipped his helmet back on, his movements efficient and practiced. Without another word, he turned and began weaving through the dense undergrowth, his steps surprisingly quiet for someone so heavily outfitted. Serena followed, her blade still in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows that seemed to thicken around them with every passing moment. The forest grew darker as the twin suns sank below the horizon, their fading light replaced by the faint bioluminescence of the foliage. Leaves pulsed with a ghostly glow, and vines dripped with liquid luminescence that pooled on the forest floor like molten stars. The beauty of it was deceptive. Reldros had a way of lulling its prey before delivering the fatal strike. "What are they?" Elias asked over his shoulder, his voice muffled by his helmet, but still audible. "Prowlers," Serena replied curtly. "They hunt in packs, relentless, intelligent." She glanced at him, her suspicion barely concealed. "How do you not know this?" "Let's just say I didn't get the full tour before arriving," he replied, his tone dry but not unkind. Her frown deepened. The human's presence on Reldros made less and less sense. What purpose could he possibly have here, in a place no human had dared to tread for decades? The underbrush rustled to their right, and both of them froze. Elias's hand dropped to the weapon at his side, a sleek device that hummed faintly as he powered it on. Serena's grip tightened on her blade, her senses sharpening as she strained to identify the source of the noise. A shape moved in the shadows, low to the ground, its eyes gleaming like molten gold in the dim light. Another appeared to their left, then another. The prowlers had found them. Serena's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had faced these creatures before, and she knew their tactics. They would circle first, testing their prey's defenses before launching an attack. "Stay close," she murmured to Elias, though the words felt foreign on her tongue. Trust was not something she gave lightly. The first prowler lunged, a blur of muscle and teeth, its dark fur blending seamlessly with the shadows. Elias moved with surprising speed, raising his weapon and firing a burst of energy that struck the creature mid-air. It yelped and crumpled to the ground, its body convulsing before going still. Serena barely had time to register her surprise before another prowler charged, this one targeting her. She sidestepped with practiced precision, her blade flashing as she drove it into the creature's flank. It let out a guttural snarl, its momentum carrying it past her before it collapsed in a heap. The remaining prowlers hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering between the fallen and the two figures standing defiant in their midst. Then, as if reaching some unspoken consensus, they melted back into the shadows, their retreat as silent as their approach. Elias exhaled sharply, lowering his weapon. That wasn't so bad. Serena shot him a sharp look. You think they're done? They'll regroup and come back stronger. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable behind the reflective visor of his helmet. Then we keep moving. Despite her better judgment, Serena followed him as he led the way deeper into the forest. The path grew treacherous, the ground uneven and littered with tangled roots that seemed to reach for her feet. Her wound throbbed with every step, and she felt her strength slipping away like water through her fingers. Elias seemed to notice. He paused by a towering tree with bark that shimmered faintly, turning to face her. You're not going to make it far in your condition. I don't need your pity, she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. It's not pity, he said calmly. It's pragmatism. He knelt and opened a compartment on his gear, pulling out a small vial filled with a viscous amber liquid. This might help. Serena eyed the vial warily. What is it? Antiseptic. Won't fix everything, but it'll slow the infection. She hesitated, the weight of her pride battling against the reality of her situation. Finally, with a resigned sigh, she sat on a nearby rock and allowed him to approach. Elias worked quickly and efficiently, his touch surprisingly gentle as he cleaned and dressed the wound. Serena watched him closely, her suspicion tempered by a flicker of curiosity. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before, yet there was something about him that felt out of place. Why are you here? She asked finally, her voice quieter than before. Elias didn't answer immediately. He secured the bandage around her side, then leaned back, his gaze meeting hers. I'm looking for something. What? His lips quirked into a faint, enigmatic smile. Answers. Before she could press him further, the forest around them erupted with noise. The prowlers were back, their howls echoing through the trees like a war cry. Elias rose to his feet, his weapon already in hand. Looks like we're out of time. Serena stood as well, gripping her blade tightly despite the weakness in her limbs. As the shadows around them shifted and the golden eyes of the prowlers emerged once more, she realized that survival would require more than just endurance. It would require trust, and that, she thought grimly, might be the greatest challenge of all. The night pressed down on them like a living thing, thick and suffocating, as if the forest itself sought to crush intruders beneath its weight. The air hummed faintly with an electric charge, a subtle warning that the prowlers were not the only danger lurking in Reldros's wild depths. Elias adjusted his weapon's settings as he and Serena crept along the faint remnants of a game trail. Her breathing was ragged, though she masked it with a stoic expression. The antiseptic had bought her time, but her strength was fading faster than either of them cared to admit. We're close, Serena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias glanced at her, his visor hiding the concern in his eyes. Close to what? A waypoint, she replied. If it's still intact, there'll be supplies. The vagueness of her answer didn't sit well with him, but he let it pass. They were too exposed to argue, and the prowlers' howls had grown eerily distant, an unsettling sign. The predators of Reldros were smart, often retreating to lure prey into a false sense of security. As they moved, the forest began to change. The bioluminescent flora gave way to towering skeletal trees whose bark gleamed like polished obsidian. Strange, spindly plants with translucent leaves lined the path, their surfaces slick with a viscous, iridescent substance that dripped onto the ground in rhythmic plops. Then they saw it, a towering structure of blackened metal and glass, half buried in the earth as if the planet had tried to consume it. Vines clung to its surface, their glowing tips pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "What is this place?" Elias asked, his voice low but tinged with curiosity. "A relic," Serena said, her tone clipped. "From a time when my people were foolish enough to think we could tame this world." Elias studied her, noting the tension in her jaw and the flicker of something, guilt perhaps, in her eyes. He decided against pressing her further. The doorway to the structure was partially ajar, its edges jagged as if something had forced it open. Serena hesitated, her hand tightening around her blade, before stepping inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the oppressive wilderness outside. Cold, sterile walls reflected the dim light from overhead panels, some of which still flickered weakly. The air smelled faintly of metal and decay. Serena led him down a narrow corridor, her steps faltering slightly as fatigue crept in. She stopped before a panel embedded in the wall, her fingers brushing over its surface. With a soft chime, the panel lit up, revealing a holographic interface filled with alien symbols. She worked quickly, her movements precise despite her obvious exhaustion. A compartment slid open, revealing a small stash of supplies. A medkit, a few sealed containers of what Elias assumed were rations, and a device that emitted a faint hum. "This will stabilize me," she said, lifting the device. Elias watched as she pressed it to her side, wincing slightly as the device activated and began emitting a soft blue light. He was about to ask how long it would take when a sudden noise echoed through the structure, a low metallic groan that sent a chill down his spine. Serena froze, her eyes darting toward the source of the sound. "We're not alone," she whispered. Elias raised his weapon, scanning the corridor behind them. The groan came again, louder this time, followed by a series of faint, rhythmic thuds. And then they saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form humanoid but wrong in ways that were difficult to articulate. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its eyes glowed with a cold, white light, and its skin, or whatever passed for it, gleamed like wet stone. Serena's breath caught. "Impossible." "What is that?" Elias asked, his grip tightening on his weapon. "A sentinel," she replied, her voice trembling. "They were decommissioned centuries ago. This one should be—" The sentinel's head snapped toward them, and it let out a piercing, mechanical screech that reverberated through the corridor. "Move!" Serena shouted, grabbing the supplies and bolting down the hall. Elias followed, his boots pounding against the metal floor as the sentinel gave chase. It moved with terrifying speed, its elongated limbs propelling it forward in a nightmarish, spider-like gait. They burst into a larger chamber, its walls lined with dormant machinery. Serena skidded to a stop, her eyes darting around for an escape route. "Up there!" Elias pointed to a maintenance ladder leading to an overhead hatch. Serena didn't hesitate, climbing with a speed that belied her earlier weakness. Elias followed, pausing only to fire a few shots at the sentinel. The energy bolt struck its chest, but it barely flinched, its glowing eyes locked onto him with unrelenting focus. They reached the hatch and scrambled through, slamming it shut behind them. Serena activated a control panel on the wall, and the hatch sealed with a hiss. For a moment, there was silence. Elias leaned against the wall, catching his breath. What the hell was that thing? "A remnant of our hubris," Serena said bitterly. "The Sentinels were meant to protect us from the dangers of this planet, but they turned against us. We thought we'd destroyed them all." Her voice trailed off, and she glanced at Elias, her expression guarded. "This is why I was exiled. My people blamed me for what happened here." Elias studied her, the pieces of her story slowly coming together. "And now it's hunting you again." Serena nodded, her gaze distant. "The Sentinels were programmed to eradicate any threat to the sanctity of Reldros. To them, I am a threat, a living reminder of our failure." Elias frowned, the weight of her words settling heavily in the air. The stakes had shifted, and the questions he'd been asking himself since their encounter grew more urgent. Who was this woman, really? And why did he feel that helping her was more than just an act of survival? The sentinel's screech echoed faintly through the sealed hatch, a grim reminder that their reprieve was temporary. The forest, the prowlers, the sentinels, everything on Reldros seemed intent on tearing them apart. And yet, as Serena met his gaze, her eyes filled with a strange mix of determination and vulnerability, Elias realized that he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when the real danger was just beginning to unfold. The wind in the canopy above roared like the sea in a storm, whispering secrets and promises of danger as it filtered through the jagged gaps of the ancient structure. Serena sat on the cold floor, her breathing slow but strained. The medtech device at her side pulsed faintly, casting flickering blue light across her grim expression. Elias crouched nearby, weapon in hand, his eyes fixed on the hatch they had sealed. It had been hours, but the sentinel's pursuit still haunted them. A faint scratching came now and then, nothing overt, just a quiet, chilling reminder that the machine had not given up. Do they ever stop? Elias broke the silence, his voice low but tense. Serena shook her head. Not unless they're destroyed or they've finished their directive. It's their flaw. A flaw She hesitated, her voice faltering for the first time since their meeting. Elias turned to her, his curiosity sharpened by her pause. You what? Her hand tightened around the hilt of her blade. The alien weapon glimmered faintly in the light, its serrated edge scarred from battles past. I programmed the flaw. The air between them grew taut. Elias straightened, the weight of her admission cutting through the lingering silence. You made those things? I was one of many, she replied, her gaze focused on the floor. But the sentinels were my specialty. I believed we could create perfect guardians for this world, machines that would save us from the wilderness we had foolishly chosen to settle. Her voice hardened, anger and sorrow tangling in her words. Instead, we made monsters. They turned against us, slaughtering anyone who interfered with their programming. I tried to stop them. My failure is why I was cast out. Elias processed her words slowly, feeling the layers of her story tighten around his thoughts like a constricting coil. The picture of her exile was becoming clear, but with clarity came even more questions. If you know how they work, he said carefully, then you know how to stop them. Serena's sharp gaze met his, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, crossing her features. Maybe, but the cost? A sudden rumble beneath them cut her off. The floor vibrated slightly, and both of them froze. They're burrowing, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias cursed under his breath, gripping his weapon tightly. We can't stay here. Serena pushed herself to her feet, wincing as the device at her side shifted. There's another exit, she said, nodding toward a dimly lit corridor. But it leads deeper into the structure. And what's down there? She hesitated, her eyes shadowed with unease. The core. Elias frowned. The core of what? This facility wasn't just a sentinel outpost, she explained. It was a testing ground for experimental technology. The core contains the central node for their programming. If we reach it, I might be able to shut them down. But what? The node is guarded, she admitted. And even if we reach it, reprogramming it requires direct neural interfacing. It could kill me. The implications hit Elias hard. He stared at her, the weight of her sacrifice sinking in. There's no other way? She shook her head. Not if we want to survive. The rumbling grew louder, punctuated by the occasional shriek of metal. The sentinel was getting closer. Elias clenched his jaw, glancing between the corridor and the hatch. Every instinct told him to leave, to escape the labyrinthine structure before it collapsed, or they were cornered. But Serena's determination held him in place. Finally, he spoke. Lead the way. They moved quickly, the corridor narrowing as they descended. The air grew colder, and the walls took on a strange, organic quality. as if the structure itself were alive. Pulses of light traveled through veins embedded in the surface, casting eerie patterns on their path. The core chamber loomed ahead, its entrance marked by a massive circular door. Serena approached the control panel, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked to open it. "Almost there," she murmured, sweat beading on her forehead. Behind them, the distant sound of the Sentinel's approach grew louder. With a hiss, the door slid open, revealing a cavernous room bathed in a harsh white light. At its center stood the node, a towering pillar of crystalline machinery that pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Serena stepped inside, her movements deliberate, but tense. She approached the node, pausing to study its intricate surface. Elias stayed near the entrance, his weapon trained on the corridor. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "I'll need a moment," she replied, placing her hands on the node. As she began her work, the room seemed to hum with energy. Patterns of light danced across the walls, growing faster and more erratic with each passing second. The Sentinel's screech echoed through the corridor, closer now than ever. Elias fired a few warning shots into the darkness, his heart pounding. "How much longer?" he called out. Serena didn't answer. Her body had gone rigid, her eyes wide and unblinking, as the node's light enveloped her. "Damn it, Serena!" Elias shouted, glancing back at her. Her voice came, distant and strained. "I can feel them. All of them. Their directives. Their rage." The Sentinel appeared in the doorway, its glowing eyes locking onto Elias. It lunged forward, but he met it with a well-aimed shot that staggered it momentarily. "They're not stopping!" he shouted, firing again. Serena's voice grew stronger, filled with a strange clarity. "I can stop them, but you have to trust me." Elias didn't hesitate. "Do it!" The node's light intensified, flooding the chamber with blinding brilliance. The Sentinel let out a final, ear-piercing screech before collapsing to the floor, its limbs twitching as if in protest. When the light faded, Serena collapsed beside the node, her breathing shallow but steady. Elias rushed to her side, relief flooding him as he saw her eyes flutter open. "They're deactivated," she whispered, her voice weak but resolute. Elias helped her to her feet, his grip firm but gentle. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. But as they exited the chamber, the question lingered in his mind. If the Sentinels were just the beginning, what other secrets did this place hold? And what price would they both pay for uncovering them? The jungle was silent. Not the quiet of peace, but the eerie stillness that follows calamity, when even the air seems to hold its breath. Elias stood at the entrance of the ruined facility, its blackened walls now stripped of the ominous hum of machinery. Beside him, Serena leaned heavily on a makeshift crutch, her every step a testament to stubborn resilience. The Sentinel's lifeless shell remained where it had fallen, its eyes dark, its joints locked in an eternal stillness. Yet neither of them looked at it. Their eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the thick canopy broke apart into slivers of light. "We need to move," Elias said softly, breaking the spell of silence. "This place might not stay quiet for long." Serena nodded, but didn't speak. Her gaze lingered on the Sentinel for a moment longer, a shadow of guilt passing over her features. As they began their trek through the jungle, the enormity of their situation settled over them. The deactivation of the Sentinels was a victory, but it was no guarantee of safety. The wilderness still teemed with dangers, and the people who had exiled Serena would not forgive such a transgression lightly. The air grew warmer as they descended into the valley, where the forest became denser. The soft rustling of leaves above and the occasional trill of an unseen creature were the only sounds accompanying their journey. "You said the node held all their directives," Elias said after a long silence. "Does that mean they're gone for good?" Serena's grip on her crutch tightened. Number I only suppressed them. Their programming remains intact, dormant. If someone were to reactivate the node... She trailed off, the weight of her words hanging between them. Elias glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "Then we didn't destroy them. We bought time," she corrected, her tone resolute. Time for this world to heal, for its people to realize their mistake. And if they don't? Her gaze met his, steady and unflinching. Then it will consume them, as it almost consumed me. They pressed on, the path ahead growing more treacherous. Vines coiled like serpents around ancient trees, their roots forming natural traps. Despite her injuries, Serena moved with purpose, her determination propelling her forward. Elias followed closely, his hand never straying far from his weapon. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by sentinels, but by something else. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly, his voice breaking the oppressive quiet. "Regret what?" "Creating them, programming their flaw." Her steps faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her pace. "Every day," she admitted. "But regret doesn't undo what's done. I've learned that the hard way." Elias nodded, though her words left an ache in his chest. He understood regret. It was a constant companion for those who fought to survive in worlds like this. As the hours passed, the forest began to change. The oppressive tangle of vines and shadows gave way to open clearings, bathed in golden light. The air smelled fresher, cleaner, as if the jungle itself were breathing easier. Serena paused at the edge of one such clearing, her eyes scanning the horizon. "This is where we part ways," she said softly. Elias stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about?" She gestured toward the distant mountains, their jagged peaks shrouded in mist. "You can reach the colony outpost if you follow the ridge. They'll take you in, give you a way off this planet." "And you?" "I have my own path to walk." Her expression was unreadable, but her voice carried a note of finality. "The sentinels may be dormant, but the damage they caused is not. My people need to see the truth, to understand what we've done to this world. I have to make them see." Elias shook his head. "You can't go back there. They'll kill you." "Perhaps," she said simply. "But I can't run from this. Not anymore." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Elias wanted to argue, to convince her that there was another way, but he could see the resolve in her eyes. This was her fight, her redemption. Finally, he spoke. "You don't have to do this alone." She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "I already tried being alone. You showed me that wasn't the answer. But this is something I have to face myself." Reluctantly, he nodded. "If you ever need a stubborn human who doesn't know when to quit, you know where to find me." Her smile widened, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you, Elias, for everything." Without another word, she turned and began walking toward the jungle, her figure soon swallowed by the trees. Elias watched until she was out of sight, his heart heavy, yet strangely hopeful. He knew she was right. This was her path. But he couldn't shake the feeling that their stories were far from over. As he made his way toward the mountains, the memories of their journey replayed in his mind. The sentinel's cold, calculating gaze, the hum of the node, the quiet strength in Serena's eyes. He didn't know what lay ahead, for her or for him. But one thing was certain. Their encounter had changed him. He had come to this world seeking answers, and though he hadn't found the ones he was looking for, he had discovered something far more important: hope. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in hues of amber and crimson, Elias continued onward, a faint smile on his lips. He would carry her story with him, just as she would carry his. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the jungle, Serena stood tall against the fading light, ready to face whatever came next. The air in the throne room was unnaturally still, a silence so dense it seemed to drink in the faint hum of the crystalline lamps above. Queen Elthara of the Cerinthian Dominion sat rigid on her obsidian throne, her gaze fixed on the great chamber doors. They stood ajar, just enough to let in a sliver of dim, pulsing light from the corridor beyond. It was a subtle anomaly, but to Elthara, Nothing was ever without meaning. Her people did not leave doors half open. The queen's pale, opalescent skin caught the glint of the light as she leaned forward. Her 6 slender fingers drummed once on the armrest of her throne, a rhythm of calculation, not impatience. She felt the wrongness before she could name it, a whisper on the edge of her mind, a sensation like the brush of static against her consciousness. She spoke, her voice a measured ripple in the stillness. "Xanthus, why is the council chamber sealed? We are to convene within the hour." The towering guard beside her, clad in polished cobalt armor, the ceremonial symbol of the royal vanguard, shifted his weight. His deep violet eyes flickered to the door, then back to her. "Your Majesty, there have been delays. The council requested privacy to finalize an urgent matter." His words were careful, too careful. Privacy. Elthara tasted the word as though it were an unfamiliar spice. Her voice was calm, but her mind moved like a storm, assembling pieces that did not yet fit. When has the council ever required privacy from its queen? Xanthus's face betrayed nothing, though his hesitation told her more than words could. "Your Majesty," he began, but the rest was swallowed by a low, resonant sound, a vibration deep enough to rattle the delicate glass spires outside the throne room. Elthara rose in a single, fluid motion. She was taller than most of her kind, a fact that had once made her appear regal, but now felt like a vulnerability in the suddenly charged air. Her royal mantle, embroidered with threads of liquid starlight, trailed behind her as she stepped down from the throne. "Stay here," she ordered, her voice sharp enough to cut. The sound came again, fainter this time, and her gaze swept the grand hall. The throne room's once pristine symmetry felt askew, the shadows too deep, the silence too expectant. The Cerinthian dominion prided itself on its mastery of balance and light, yet here, in the heart of its power, Elthara felt imbalance. Her bare feet moved soundlessly across the onyx floor as she approached the doors. Before she reached them, they opened wider, just a fraction, and a figure stepped into view. It was Varric, her chief counselor, his usually serene features drawn tight. His robe was askew, a rare lapse in his otherwise meticulous appearance. His 4 eyes avoided hers, an evasion so blatant it confirmed what her instincts had already told her. This was no ordinary disturbance. "Your Majesty," he said, inclining his head just enough to be polite without conveying the respect his title demanded. "There is a matter we must discuss, urgently." "You speak of urgency, yet your tone suggests avoidance," she replied, stepping closer. Her eyes, glowing pools of azure, searched his face. "What has happened, Varric? Speak plainly." Varric hesitated, then gestured toward the corridor. "Not here. There are ears in places they should not be." Elthara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she followed him. Her guard moved to follow, but a flick of her hand halted him. If this was a trap, she would face it alone. Her dignity would allow no less. The corridor beyond was dimmer than usual, its golden luminescence dulled to a cold silver. As they walked, Varric began to speak, his words precise yet maddeningly opaque. "There have been developments within the council. Doubts about the continuation of your rule have surfaced." Doubts. The single word fell like a stone into water. "It is not as simple as dissent," Varric continued. "There are forces at work, forces that seek to destabilize not just your reign, but the entire foundation of the Dominion." She stopped abruptly, turning to face him. "And you? Do you stand among these forces, Varric?" His gaze flicked to hers, sharp but unreadable. "I have always served the Dominion, Your Majesty. That has not changed. But the Council, they do not all see as I do." Before she could respond, a sudden hiss filled the air, like the exhale of a great beast. The corridor lights flickered, plunging them into brief darkness. When they stabilized, Varric was gone. Elthara's breath quickened, but she forced herself to remain still, her senses extending outward. She felt the pulse of the city around her, the vast, layered architecture of her capital. But something was wrong. The flow of energy that sustained it was faltering, the balance she had always maintained slipping through unseen cracks. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned swiftly to see Xanthus approaching, his weapon drawn. "Your Majesty, the palace is under attack. We must retreat." "Under attack?" she echoed, her voice soft with disbelief. "The council has declared you unfit to rule," Xanthus said, his words a blow sharper than any blade. "Your command has been overruled." It was then that she heard it, the distant roar of ships descending, the telltale scream of plasma weapons discharging in the city below. And in that moment, the queen of the Cerinthian dominion knew two things. Her throne had been stolen, and her survival would depend on trusting no one. The faintest flicker of movement at the end of the corridor drew her attention. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadows, but unmistakably human. Their stance was unthreatening, almost casual, but their presence in this chaos was a question mark she could not ignore. "Your Majesty," the figure called out, their voice carrying a strange accent. "If you want to live, follow me." And for the first time in her life, Elthara, sovereign of billions, hesitated. The corridors of the Cerinthian palace, once the epitome of order and symmetry, now echoed with the sounds of chaos. Elthara moved swiftly, the human's cryptic offer of salvation still reverberating in her mind. She hadn't followed him, not yet. Instead, she had chosen the path she knew best, navigating through secret passageways carved into the palace's ancient stone, their existence known only to the royal bloodline. The queen's breathing was steady, but her heart thrummed with urgency. The betrayal of her council gnawed at her pride and instincts, leaving questions spiraling in her mind. Who could have orchestrated such an elaborate coup? What force could have turned her own people against her so completely? Ahead, the passage forked. To the left lay the royal archives, a trove of knowledge and power. To the right, an exit that led into the labyrinthine streets of the capital's undercity. She paused, weighing her options. Every fiber of her being longed to confront the conspirators directly, to unearth their motives and reclaim her throne. Yet the roaring commotion above told her this was no ordinary betrayal. This was war, and even a queen had to choose her battles. A voice broke through her thoughts, low and urgent. "If you hesitate much longer, Your Majesty, they'll find you." The human. He had appeared again, this time at her side, moving with a quiet agility that belied his stature. His face, lit faintly by the pale glow of the passage's crystalline walls, revealed little beyond his calm resolve. "You presume much," she said, her tone sharp as a blade. "And you waste time," he countered, his voice level but firm. "I don't care about your pride or your crown. Right now, survival is all that matters." Elthara stared at him, searching for a sign of duplicity. The human was unremarkable in appearance, shorter than her, with features softened by mortality's inevitable touch. Yet his eyes were steady, unwavering, a rare quality in a species so ephemeral. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice a shade softer. "Liam Callahan," he replied. "Diplomat. Or at least I was, before this mess." A diplomat? Her mind reeled. The council had mentioned his presence during the last negotiations, but she had paid him little attention. Why would a diplomat risk his life for her now? The question hung between them, unanswered, as a distant explosion shook the passage. "They're getting closer," Liam said, gesturing toward the right fork. "We need to move." For the first time in her reign, Elthara allowed someone else to guide her. Together they plunged deeper into the undercity, the polished elegance of the palace giving way to the harsh, metallic grit of its industrial veins. The air grew colder and heavier as they descended, the hum of machinery blending with the faint murmur of voices. The undercity was a world apart, a sprawling network of tunnels and chambers that sustained the capital above. It was here that the workers and outcasts lived, their existence hidden from the pristine vistas of the royal spires. As they moved, Liam spoke in quick, clipped sentences. The Council didn't just turn on you, Your Majesty. They've allied with someone, something beyond this world. I've seen the signals, intercepted fragments of their communications. Whoever they're working with, it's not just about power, it's about destruction. Destruction of what? She asked, her voice taut. Your empire, for starters, he said, glancing at her, and maybe the rest of us too if they succeed. His words stirred a flicker of unease within her. The Cerinthian Dominion had enemies, of course, but none capable of orchestrating such a devastating blow. Unless... Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement ahead. Figures emerged from the shadows, 2, 3, then 5. They were armed, their weapons crude but functional, their faces obscured by makeshift masks. "Stop right there!" one of them barked, his voice rough. "No one gets through without paying the toll." Elthara stepped forward, her regal bearing undiminished despite the grime and dim light. "Do you know who I am?" The leader of the group hesitated, his stance faltering for the briefest moment. Then he laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "We know who you were. Doesn't mean a thing down here." Before she could respond, Liam placed a hand on her arm, a gesture both cautionary and strangely protective. "Let me handle this," he murmured. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "We don't want trouble," he said calmly, his hands raised. "We're just passing through." The leader sneered. "Then leave everything you've got, and maybe we'll let you." Elthara's patience snapped. In a fluid motion, she stepped past Liam, her hand raised. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and a wave of force rippled outward, knocking the bandits back, but leaving Liam untouched. The leader scrambled to his feet, his weapon raised, but Elthara's gaze froze him in place. "You will let us pass," she said, her voice low and commanding. "And you will not speak of this to anyone." The man nodded frantically, his bravado shattered. The group scattered, vanishing into the shadows. "You didn't have to do that," Liam said, as they resumed their path. "They would have slowed us down," she replied, her tone flat. "I do not have the luxury of patience." The deeper they ventured, the more the Undercity revealed its secrets. They passed through vast caverns filled with humming machinery, their operators casting wary glances at the pair. In one chamber, they saw remnants of ancient technology, its purpose long forgotten, but its design unmistakably Cerinthian. Liam paused to examine a console, its surface etched with glowing symbols. "This isn't just a refuge," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "This is a vault." "A vault?" she echoed. "For knowledge. Power," he said, running his fingers over the console. "Whoever controls this place controls more than the city, maybe more than the Empire." Elthara's gaze darkened. "Then we must ensure it does not fall into the wrong hands." As they moved onward, the weight of their mission pressed heavier upon them. The Undercity was no longer a mere refuge. It was a battleground waiting to ignite. And somewhere above, the Council's forces hunted relentlessly, their betrayal a constant shadow over Elthara's thoughts. Yet as she glanced at Liam, his steady determination unwavering, she found a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. But hope, she knew, could be as dangerous as any weapon. The air in the Undercity grew thicker the deeper they ventured, charged with a strange energy that tingled against Elthara's skin. The labyrinth had become quieter, the distant hum of machinery replaced by an uneasy stillness. The deeper passageways seemed untouched for decades, their walls streaked with the patina of time. Liam moved ahead, his movements cautious yet purposeful. He stopped at intervals, consulting a handheld device that projected faint holographic schematics. It was alien in design, not Cerinthian, and this fact did not escape Elthara. "Your device," she said at last, her voice cutting through the silence. "It is not human." Liam paused, his shoulders stiffening. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he said simply. Elthara's eyes narrowed. "How did you acquire it?" "I didn't acquire it," he said, his tone deliberate. "It was given to me." "By whom?" He hesitated, then sighed. By someone who said it would help me understand what's really happening here. And they weren't wrong. This device has saved my life more than once. Elthara's gaze lingered on him, her distrust sharpening. Yet before she could press further, a low rhythmic sound echoed through the corridor. It was faint, but insistent, like a pulse. "What is that?" Liam asked, his voice hushed. Elthara didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, her senses expanding. The sound wasn't just audible, it resonated through her, a vibration that tugged at her very core. "This is not ordinary machinery," she said at last. "Something ancient lies ahead." They pressed on, the pulse growing stronger with each step. The corridor widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. At the center stood a colossal structure, a spire of dark, crystalline material that shimmered faintly with an inner light. Elthara froze, recognition dawning upon her. "The Null Spire," she whispered. Liam turned to her, his expression questioning. "What's a Null Spire?" "It is a relic," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "A fragment of the pre-Empire era. My ancestors spoke of such spires, scattered across the galaxy. Their purpose was never fully understood, but they were said to hold immense power, power that could shape worlds or destroy them." Liam's gaze shifted to the spire, his face darkening. "If your council knew about this, they wouldn't have dared activate it," she said, though her words lacked conviction. "Wouldn't they?" Liam countered. "You said yourself they've allied with someone beyond your world. Whoever they're working with might have given them the knowledge to use this thing." As if in response, the spire pulsed, its glow intensifying. A low hum filled the chamber, and the air grew heavier, charged with static. "Stay back," Elthara ordered, stepping closer to the spire. She reached out cautiously, her hand stopping just short of its surface. The energy emanating from it was overwhelming, a torrent of power barely contained. Her mind was flooded with images, not memories but fragments of something vast and ancient. Stars collapsing into black voids, cities consumed by light, voices distant and indistinct, whispering of balance and destruction. "Elthara!" Liam's voice snapped her back to the present. She turned to see him standing at the edge of the chamber, his device projecting a series of rapidly changing glyphs. "We're not alone," he said. At that moment, figures emerged from the shadows. They were humanoid but not entirely Cerinthian. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "Drones," Elthara said, her voice low. "They don't look friendly," Liam muttered, drawing a small weapon from his belt. The drones moved with chilling coordination, encircling the spire and cutting off any path of escape. One of them stepped forward, its voice a distorted echo. "You should not be here." "This spire belongs to the Dominion," Elthara said, her tone firm. "As its queen, I demand to know your purpose." The drone tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost mocking. "The Dominion is no longer yours, Elthara. Your reign has ended." Before she could respond, the drones advanced. Liam fired his weapon, the shot striking one of them square in the chest. The drone staggered but didn't fall, its movements uninterrupted. "Run!" Liam shouted, but Elthara stood her ground. She raised her hands, summoning a surge of energy that rippled outward, knocking several drones off balance. The power was raw and untamed, drawn from the same force that pulsed through the spire. "Your Majesty, we can't take them all." Liam's voice was frantic. Reluctantly, Elthara turned and followed him, her heart pounding as the hum of the spire grew louder. The drones pursued them, their footsteps a relentless rhythm. They emerged into another corridor, its walls lined with faintly glowing runes. The energy here was different, calmer, almost protective. "What was that back there?" Liam demanded, his voice sharp. "You didn't just knock them down, you pulled something from that spire." "I don't know," she admitted, her voice strained, "but it's ancient, older than the Dominion itself. If the Council has harnessed its power, then this isn't just about you or your throne, Liam finished grimly. It's about the whole galaxy. Elthara met his gaze, her resolve hardening. Then we must stop them. And how do you propose we do that? He asked. She looked at the runes on the walls, their patterns stirring a memory deep within her. We find the architect. Liam frowned. The who? The architect, she repeated. The one who built the spires. If they still exist, they are the only one who can help us. Liam exhaled, his expression a mix of disbelief and determination. And where do we start looking? Elthara touched the nearest rune, her fingers tracing its glowing lines. The walls seemed to respond, their light intensifying. Here, she said, a hint of a smile breaking through her tension. The path begins here. Behind them, the distant hum of the spire grew louder, a reminder of the relentless forces pursuing them. But for the first time since her fall, Elthara felt a spark of hope, faint but unmistakable. The road ahead would be perilous, but she was no longer running. She was searching, and she would find the answers she needed to reclaim her throne and save her empire. The glow of the runes faded as the narrow passage opened into a cavernous space. The air felt charged with expectation, thick and heavy, like the moments before a storm. Liam and Elthara stood at the threshold, gazing into the chamber, its expanse filled with ancient machinery and faintly glowing conduits that ran like veins through the rock. "This is it," Elthara said, her voice a reverent whisper. "What is it?" Liam asked, his eyes scanning the alien technology. His expression was a mixture of awe and unease. "Another relic?" "Not just any relic," she replied, stepping forward. Her fingertips brushed the cool surface of a control console, its symbols flickering to life beneath her touch. "This is the Heart Forge, the nexus of the Null Spires." Liam frowned. "You said the spires were scattered across the galaxy. How can this place control them all?" Elthara's gaze remained fixed on the console as she answered. "The spires are not merely objects of power. They are conduits, connected through an ancient network that predates even my ancestors. The Heart Forge is the key to their purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Liam pressed. Elthara hesitated. Her people's histories spoke of the spires as instruments of balance, capable of incredible creation or catastrophic destruction. But the details were shrouded in myth, the truth obscured by centuries of reverence and fear. Before she could answer, the chamber trembled. The faint hum of the machinery grew louder, and the light of the conduits pulsed in sync with a rhythmic vibration. "They're activating," she murmured, her voice tight with urgency. Liam turned to her, alarm etched on his face. "What does that mean?" "It means we're running out of time." As they moved deeper into the Heart Forge, the mysteries surrounding the Council's betrayal began to unravel. The conduits led to a massive central dais, where a projection flickered to life. It showed a map of the galaxy, dotted with glowing points of light, each representing a null spire. Elthara studied the map, her expression darkening. "They've already begun synchronizing the spires." "What happens if they finish?" Liam asked. She hesitated. "If the spires are fully synchronized, they will unleash an energy wave powerful enough to rewrite entire systems. Planets, stars, civilizations, they would all be remade or erased." Liam stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "Why would your council want that?" "Because they've lost faith in the old ways," she said bitterly. "They see the spires as tools to forge a new order, one where they hold absolute power." "And what about you?" he asked, his voice low. "What would you do with this power?" Her gaze snapped to his, and for a moment she saw the doubt in his eyes. She couldn't blame him. The temptation of such power was a shadow that loomed over anyone who knew its potential. "I would destroy it," she said firmly. "The spires were never meant to be wielded like this. Their power is too great, too dangerous. It must be sealed away, forever." Her conviction silenced him, but only for a moment. Then how do we stop this? Elthara's hand hovered over the console, her mind racing. The heart forge held the key to the spire's synchronization, but accessing it would require a sacrifice, a connection to the energy that flowed through the network. It was a connection that could not be severed without a cost. I can stop it, she said, her voice steady. But I'll need your help. Liam frowned. What kind of help? As they worked to disrupt the synchronization process, the chamber shuddered with the approach of their pursuers. The Council's drones had tracked them, their relentless march a grim reminder of the stakes. Elthara and Liam stood back to back, their movements synchronized as they fought to hold off the attackers. Her powers, drawn from the spire's energy, surged with ferocity, each blast of force striking with precision. Liam's weaponry, though primitive in comparison, was no less effective, his aim unerring even under pressure. But the drones were endless, their numbers overwhelming. For everyone they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. We can't hold them off forever, Liam shouted. We don't need to, Elthara replied, her voice resolute. I'm almost ready. She returned to the console, her hands moving with practiced precision. The conduit's glow intensified, their light bathing the chamber in an otherworldly brilliance. Liam, she said, her voice soft but firm. He turned to her, sweat dripping from his brow. What? There's something I haven't told you, she began, her gaze meeting his. To sever the synchronization, I must anchor myself to the heart forge. Once I do, I won't be able to leave. His eyes widened. You mean, I will become part of the network, she said, cutting him off. It's the only way to stop the spires from activating. No, he said, shaking his head. There has to be another way. There isn't, she said, her voice unwavering. This is my responsibility, my burden to bear. Liam's jaw clenched. I didn't risk my life to save you just so you could throw it away. And I didn't ask for your help, she shot back, her tone sharp, but I'm grateful for it. You've given me a chance to do what must be done. The chamber trembled again, the drones closing in. Elthara stepped onto the dais, her hands outstretched as she connected to the heart forge. The energy surged through her, searing and relentless, but she held firm. Liam stood at the edge of the dais, his fists clenched. There has to be another way, he said again, his voice breaking. Elthara looked at him, her expression softening. Sometimes, the only way forward is through sacrifice, she said. The light of the conduits reached its peak, and the drones halted, their movements frozen as if caught in an invisible web. The energy in the chamber surged, a crescendo of power that resonated through the galaxy. And then, silence. When the light faded, Elthara was gone. The heart forge stood dormant, its power sealed away. Liam stood alone, his chest heaving as the weight of what had just happened settled over him. But even in his grief, he knew her sacrifice had not been in vain. The synchronization had been stopped, the spire's power contained. The galaxy was safe, for now. Yet as he turned to leave, the faintest flicker of light caught his eye. A single rune on the console glowed softly, a reminder that Elthara's story was far from over. The silence that followed Elthara's sacrifice was unlike any Liam had ever known. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the weight of something vast and incomprehensible having come to rest. The heart forge, once alive with blinding energy, now stood dormant. Its conduits were dark, its hum extinguished. Liam knelt on the dais, his head bowed, fingers brushing the faintly glowing rune that was all that remained of Elthara's presence. He had come to this forgotten place as a diplomat, an outsider caught in the chaos of a foreign empire's collapse. Now, he was something else, a man carrying the weight of a queen's last stand. The air in the chamber shifted, faint currents brushing against him as if the heart forge itself was exhaling. Liam rose slowly, the ache in his body a distant echo compared to the grief pressing against his chest. He pocketed the handheld device that had guided him this far, its holographic readout flickering weakly. As he turned to leave, a low, resonant tone filled the cavern. It wasn't menacing, but ancient, mournful, and undeniably alive. He froze, his pulse quickening. The faint rune flared brighter, and then her voice, Elthara's voice, whispered through the space. "Liam." He spun around, his eyes wide. The light from the rune coalesced, swirling upward to form a shimmering figure. It was her, not fully corporeal, not entirely real, but unmistakably Elthara. Her translucent form shimmered like a reflection on still water, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. You're alive?" His voice cracked, caught between hope and disbelief. "In a manner of speaking," she replied, her tone calm, yet tinged with sorrow. "The Heartforge demanded an anchor, and now I am part of it. My body is gone, but my essence endures." Liam stepped closer, his hands trembling. "There has to be a way to reverse this, to bring you back." She shook her head gently. "My choice was final. The synchronization has been halted and the spire's power is contained. For now, the galaxy is safe." "For now?" he repeated, catching the ominous note in her words. "The Council's betrayal ran deeper than I knew," she explained, her voice heavy with regret. "Their allies, whoever provided them with the knowledge to activate the spires, will not stop here. The spires are dormant, but their existence is no longer a secret. Others will seek to control them." "Then what do we do?" Liam asked. Her gaze softened. "You must return to the surface. The Empire needs a leader, someone who can rebuild trust and unity. You've seen the truth, Liam. You've walked in the shadows and fought for what is right. You are more than a diplomat. You are the bridge between worlds." He laughed bitterly. "I'm just a human, Elthara. Your people won't listen to me." "They will," she said, her voice firm. "Because I will speak through you." The journey back to the surface was long and arduous, but Liam felt the weight of Elthara's presence guiding him. The drones that once pursued them now stood inert, their glowing eyes dim. The corridors of the Undercity seemed less hostile, as if the Heartforge's calming influence had spread through the labyrinth. When he finally emerged into the light of the capital, he found a city in turmoil. The Council's forces had fractured in the wake of the failed synchronization, and rival factions vied for control. Streets that once echoed with the ordered rhythms of Cerinthian life were now filled with chaos and despair. Liam wasted no time. He made his way to the Central Forum, the seat of power that Elthara had once ruled from. Its grand halls were eerily empty, the councillors having fled in fear of retribution. Standing before the throne, he activated the handheld device. Its holographic projector flared to life, and Elthara's image appeared. Her presence silenced the crowd that had gathered in the forum. Whispers of disbelief spread through the onlookers, their expressions a mix of awe and hope. "My people," she began, her voice resonating through the chamber. "I may no longer stand before you in flesh, but I am still your queen. My absence does not mark the end of our empire. It marks the beginning of its rebirth." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the gathered crowd. The Council sought to use the spires for their own gain, disregarding the balance that has sustained our galaxy for millennia. Their actions endangered not only our world, but countless others. They betrayed the trust you placed in them, and for that, they must answer. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Liam stepped forward, his voice steady. "Elthara has entrusted me with her vision. Together we will rebuild this empire, not through domination, but through cooperation. The path ahead will be difficult, but we can walk it together." Over the following weeks, Liam and Elthara's projection worked tirelessly to stabilize the empire. The remaining councillors were apprehended, their plans exposed for all to see. The factions that had risen in the wake of the power vacuum were brought to the table, their grievances heard and addressed. Elthara's presence, though spectral, became a symbol of resilience. Her people rallied behind her, their faith in her unwavering. Liam, once an outsider, earned their respect through his actions and unwavering commitment to their cause. As the empire began to heal, Liam often found himself in quiet moments of reflection. He would stand in the Heartforge's projection chamber, speaking with Elthara about the challenges they faced and the future they envisioned. "You've done well, Liam," she said one evening, her voice filled with quiet pride. "So have you," he replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Though I wish you were here, really here." She looked at him, her expression tinged with sadness. "Perhaps one day the Heartforge will release me. But until then, I will remain where I am needed most." As the Empire stood on the cusp of a new era, the Nullspires remained a looming presence, silent sentinels of a bygone age. Their power, though contained, was a reminder of the galaxy's fragility. Liam and Elthara knew their work was far from over, but for now, they had won a hard-fought peace, and the bonds they had forged, between worlds, between peoples, and between themselves, would endure. And so, the dethroned queen and the human diplomat became legends in their own right, their story whispered across the stars as a tale of sacrifice, resilience, and the unyielding power of hope.